Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents System Harbinger by Buzzell. Narrated by Todd Mclaren. 1. Attack on Station. Bullets flew past Lance as he dove over the metal table they sat at. He kicked it over to provide concealment. Patrons rushed into the restaurant, several getting hit along the way, with one dropping straight to the ground, a hole in the side of his head.
"Val!"
Lance shouted, as he examined her armor for blood.
"I'm good," she replied. "Just got my bell rung."
Holes exploded in the table behind him. A bullet missed him narrowly enough to tear his uniform without hitting him.
"I'm going to get you to cover. You stay down." "I can help."
"No!" Lance ordered. Grabbing Valdivia's armor, Lance broke his cover as they spun, and with all his might he threw the Jarog into the restaurant with the others. She hit the ground just behind the wall as bits of it chipped away from incoming fire. The captain dashed for the cover of the eatery as well. As he did, he glanced toward the gunman. There was a second right behind the first. His heart sank in disbelief. He'd recognize that black armor anywhere. A fire erupted in his belly as rage boiled inside of him. Looking at the waiter, he grabbed a serving towel and started to wrap his right hand with it. "Do you have anything that could be used as a weapon?" Lance asked.
"We have knives,"
the waiter replied with a wheeze. "Get me one. Everyone else get to the back room and stay down," he ordered, before trying to activate his multi-tools communicator. It was scrambled.
"Crap!"
Val was on her feet, one hand on her visor while the other assisted in getting people up and moving, as the sound of gunfire echoed through the station. The Halthron waddled from the back, but stopped as the gunfire got closer.
"Bring me the knife!"
Lance shouted. The waiter threw it toward the soldier. It landed halfway between the two.
"By the goddess,"
Valdivia muttered with a shake of her head. She marched over to the cooking utensil and picked it up before marching over toward Lance and handing it to him. Judging by the sounds of the rifle fire, their attacker was close enough to start pieing the corner. Grabbing Val, he pressed her against the wall before doing the same, keeping himself between the outside world and the Jarog. Lance held the knife tightly in his left hand. His heart slammed in his chest, fueled by adrenaline and the rage he hadn't felt in some time. A smirk spread across his lips as the barrel of an HRG poked around the corner a few inches from the wall. He switched the knife to his wrapped hand. Once enough of the barrel protruded from behind the wall, Lance rushed out. He grabbed the weapon, raised it above his head, and pointed away from himself before throwing the knife at the second fireman. He didn't see where it hit, just that it made the armored man stagger.
"Didn't anyone ever tell you to pie your corners?"
Lance roared. He drove his wrapped fist into the attacker's helmet as hard as he could, in between each word. As the black-armored man's head snapped back with each blow, the screen of his helmet cracked before fully surrendering, revealing a human inside. The first gunman fell to the ground, likely dead from the coup-contre-coup trauma of being punched by a boxer. In a flash, Lance shouldered the HRG and pointed it toward the second gunman, who was already on his knees. Blood spurted from his throat, soaking his gear and staining the ground around him. Lance approached the attacker, eyeing their surroundings. There weren't any other soldiers in the near vicinity, but their gunshots could still be heard.
"Where's your commander?"
Lance asked, as he crouched down and grabbed the downed enemy's weapon.
"You tell me where she is, and I'll make your passing swift and easy."
A gurgling cackle left the dying man as his hand clenched closed.
"Target acquired, northern edge of Tindus,"
the soldier said, before he fell forward. Sparks flew from both sets of armor. Lance stood up and held the HRG out to Valdivia.
"I'm sorry to ask you to do this, but I need you to protect these people,"
he said, as he walked back to cover. She took the rifle and nodded before he looked at the waiter.
"You! Can this close up?"
"It has metal doors that seal it at night,"
the alien replied.
"Good. Close it, lock it up, and if I come across any medical personnel, I'll send them here," Lance said.
If anyone comes here and tells you to open the door, say, 'One-eyed God.' If they don't reply with, 'Great Odin's raven,' don't let them in. If they try to get in, shoot them." Valdivia nodded as she placed a hand on his side.
"Be careful,"
she said. "As much as I can be," Lance replied, before exiting the restaurant. Lance hugged the wall and poked his head around the corner. He saw movement in the distance, too far to take an accurate shot. Turning, he backed away to the far side of the eatery and glanced around the corner to see several embassy guards taking cover at the top of the stairwell. As the barrier of the diner closed, they turned to see the source of the noise before aiming their weapons at Lance.
"Hands where we can see them!"
they roared. He was surprised they didn't open fire on him. Grabbing the weapon by the barrel, he held both his hands up as he stepped into plain view of the guards before stepping up on the stairwell to maintain cover.
"I'm Captain Lance Warder of the S4. I'm no threat to you,"
he called back. One of the guards lowered his weapon and whispered to the other. As they deliberated, the soldier caught the glimpse of a black helmet behind them. Quickly he shouldered his weapon and fired a single round. The bullet traveled between both guards, striking the visor of the inbound attacker. As the helmet whipped back, the mercenary's weapon discharged, missing both guards. In the blink of an eye, they both turned around and opened fire, killing their would-be assailant.
"They are!"
Lance called back.
"May I approach?" "Get up here!"
the first guard called out. Lance sprinted up the steps, reaching their side in seconds. He scanned around the second level for the dead man's backup. Sparks flew from his armor as well. Raising his rifle, the captain caught movement behind a bush. He trained his weapon on the movement until it stood up, revealing it as the squad mate. Just before Lance squeezed the trigger, Wrath barreled out of a nearby alleyway, his weapon stowed. Bullets bounced off his armor as he picked the armored being off the ground, an arm in one hand, a leg in the other. With a mighty roar and a wet splash, the Tardig ripped his attacker in half in a shower of crimson.
"Wrath! It's good to see you, my friend,"
Lance called out, drawing the Tardig's attention. Lifting his rifle, Lance traversed the opening in a quick crouch walk as both the guards followed closely behind. Reaching the Tardig, he leaned against the planter, rolling some intestines out of the way so as not to slip on them. "You doing okay, big guy?" Lance asked.
"Why are humans attacking us?"
Wrath snarled, as he pulled his shotgun and pointed it at Lance.
"Whoa, whoa, whoa!"
Kolar called out as he emerged from behind a planter a little further down. "Put your weapon away. He's not going to hurt you."
"You don't tell me what to do, prisoner,"
Wrath barked. "He's right. I'm not going to hurt you because it's not us," Lance explained. "It's an offshoot of humanity called the Veles, and they're just real big jerks."
"Prove it,"
the Tardig ordered. "All Veles that I've come across are marked on their neck. An upside-down triangle with a blocky U shape above it that is visible under UV light," Lance explained, as he activated the UV setting of his multi-tool and waved it over his neck. "No brand." Wrath reached down to the upper half of the dead and pulled his helmet off. Lance swiped over his neck. The symbol flared, even through the thick layer of blood. The Tardig lowered his weapon. "Where's Chadavia and the other SOATs?" Lance asked.
"Some are assisting evacuation of civilians. Most were out on a training exercise, and the hangar doors are sealed shut, so they can't talk,"
Wrath replied. "Okay. Does this station have any external weaponry?" Lance asked. "It's illegal for space stations to have mounted weapons," one of the guards behind Lance replied. The captain looked up at Wrath with a raised eyebrow. He nodded after a moment's pause. "That's what I thought. If you can get a message out, tell everyone to get as far away from the station as they can, and do not engage with any crafts that leave until after they're out of range," Lance suggested. "Why?" Kolar probed, while keeping an eye out. Lance picked up the dead Veles' HRG and handed it to the Gallio before waving them to follow him as he started down a part of the Tindus he'd never been before, making sure to hug the wall as he did. Because if I were planning an attack like this, the first thing I'd do, even before executing my plan, would be to hijack the ship's weapon systems to open fire and cover my escape, Lance explained, as he stopped at the edge of a shop. And I went through OCS with their leader, so I know how she thinks. Lance peered around the edge. Wrath craned above him to peek as well. Several citizens were on their knees, hands on the backs of their heads, with a handful of Veles operatives circling them.
"We go out there. Those civilians are dead,"
Wrath muttered with a shake of his head. Biting the inside of his cheek, Lance glanced around to find something they could use. He looked back at the guards. "If we distract them, can you get those civilians to safety?" Lance asked. They nodded. "Okay. You get as close to them as you can without being seen. In 45 seconds, we'll distract them, and you'll get their prisoners to safety." Both guards nodded and disappeared around the side edge of the shop. Lance checked his weapon as he counted. It was operational. He looked at Kolar's. It was good, too. "This is very similar to your regular rifle," Lance whispered as he put his hand on the cooling system. "If this starts beeping, though, press this button. It'll eject the cooling system, and throw it as far away as you can because it's about to explode." Kolar nodded, and Lance checked the safety switch as well, and flipped the weapon from fully automatic to burst fire. "You'll get 3 shots per trigger squeeze," he added, before looking up at the Tardig. "How accurate is your weapon?" Wrath holstered the shotgun on his lower back before pulling his pistol out and doing a quick weapon check.
"As accurate as your human rifles," the Tardig replied. "How do you plan to create a distraction that won't get the civilians killed?"
Lance took his position once again and eyed the Veles once more, memorizing their patterns and studying what they could use for cover or concealment. He reached 30 in his head. His thumb ran over the safety switch of his rifle. He flipped it to single shots. Turning back to the Tardig, he cracked a smile before nodding at Kolar. Wrath's head tilted to one side in confusion. "Hey, Kolar," Lance whispered. "You remember how I told you that it was a faction of humanity that was responsible for your mother's death? This is them." 2. True Target.
"Really?"
the Gallio asked, the frills on the top of his head stiffening. "As truly as I'm standing before you," Lance replied. "They were hoping to start a war, thinking they could take you on because they're space Nazis."
"What's a Nazi?"
Wrath asked. "I'll send you some literature," Lance replied. Kolar checked his weapon one more time. Stepping out of cover, he let out a furious scream as he sprinted across the exposed pathway ahead, unloading at full speed as he sprinted.
"Was that a good idea? Civilians are in the line of fire,"
Wrath asked.
"Probably not, but let's get to work,"
Lance replied. He rounded the corner and lifted his rifle up. Every Veles operative's attention was locked on Kolar. Each of them fired his direction, as the Gallio missed almost every shot, his bullets hitting high on the structures around them. Lance unloaded 3-round burst after 3-round burst. Sparks flew off the helmet of his target, throwing her off balance. After the 9th bullet, her gear gave way and a red mist spattered across her visor as she fell to the ground. The incoming side fire pulled the attention of half the soldiers. They unloaded at Lance and Wrath. Sparks flew from the Tardig's armor as rounds bounced off him and his uncovered head, making him twitch, but not harming him. Rounds impacted all around Lance. After a split second, he noticed none of the incoming fire was even aimed at him. Wrath lifted his pistol and took aim.
Coom!
A fireball the size of Lance's head erupted from the pistol. The shockwave from its muzzle brake slammed into the side of the captain's face like being punched by a heavyweight boxer. Lance's ears rang, not only from the concussive blast, but the deafening sound as well. He staggered sideways while one of the Veles was ripped in half and fell to the ground. At the sight of what carnage one shot could unleash, they turned and started to retreat toward the water. Wrath stepped forward a few more paces. He grabbed his pistol with both hands and held it tight. Like a human shooting a .22, the Tardig unloaded his literal hand cannon at the Veles. One escaped, and Kolar lowered his weapon and charged after them.
"Civilians are safe!"
the guard shouted from one of the shops that they'd closed.
"Good! Get in there with them!"
Lance ordered. Knowing they'd never go for it, he fudged the reasoning, aside from that non-humans were the targets.
"If there's another assault, they'll need you to protect them."
Lance rushed after the Gallio. Making his way to the nearest wall, he moved quickly and quietly, with Wrath close behind. "What is that thing?" the soldier asked, as HRG gunfire rang out.
"I believe your people would call it a pea shooter,"
Wrath replied. "I'd hate to see what you'd consider a hand cannon," Lance muttered. Reaching the edge of their cover, he peeked out. Kolar ran down the last Veles member. They were on the ground with both primary and secondary weapons strewn around. The Gallio straddled the mercenary while using the buttstock of his gun to beat the armor off his enemy.
"Cover me!"
Lance ordered. He rushed toward the Veles as Wrath swept the field with his weapon. Lance grabbed Kolar and pulled him off the beaten terrorist.
"He needs to die!"
Kolar roared, as he kicked and scrambled to try and finish the job.
"You kill him like this and you're right back where you started,"
Lance shouted, setting Kolar down and stepping between him and the groaning Veles.
"If they're shooting at you or holding hostages, go to town. If they're down and beaten, restrain them for questioning."
A cackle rose from the nearly dead Veles, before sparks flew from his armor as its internal circuits fried themselves, doing the same to the man inside. "Or that'll happen," Lance mumbled.
"Cop!"
Dexter shouted from behind them. Lance turned. From one of the hallways, Stephanie, Dexter, and Matthias descended the steps. They were armed with Veles weapons, bloodied, with Matthias sporting a gauze wrap around his shoulder that was stained crimson.
"You guys good?"
Lance asked, kicking the weapons away from the corpse and making his way to his team.
"Mostly,"
Matthias groaned.
"He got hit pretty good,"
Stephanie replied.
"That's not the problem,"
Dex interrupted.
"The problem is we've got about 30 of them marching down that hallway right now, and we can't fight that many fully armored people without gear of our own."
"Or time to set up a trap,"
Stephanie added. Lance turned to the Tardig. "Wrath, you hear that?" he asked.
"I did,"
the giant alien replied, as he pointed his pistol toward the hallway opening.
"And I've got plenty of shots left."
"What's that gonna do?" Dexter scoffed. "Just take positions, and if you can, plug the ear that's facing him," Lance ordered. Taking cover behind planters, everyone made a spaced-out firing line with their rifles aimed at the hallway opening. Tink, 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 tink. A long, cylindrical piece of metal flew from the top of the steps and rolled among the Hrafn squad.
"Flashbang!"
Lance screamed. Drawing behind his cover, he closed his eyes, turned his back to it, and plugged his ears. As it detonated, the flash was still almost blinding. The bang didn't hurt, but didn't make his ears ring. Before they could right themselves, bullets rained down from the opening.
Coom!
Wrath fired his weapon. The projectile slammed into something solid, judging by the vibrations that shook the ground. Screams of agony rose from the Veles position as inbound fire stopped for a split second. Hrafn's squad and Kolar took advantage of the opening. They all rose from their cover and unloaded everything they had at the stairwell opening. Several feet behind it was a hole the size of a cannonball. Most of the lead sent at the enemy was suppressive, preventing them from being able to continue shooting back, giving Wrath just enough time to line up his shots. Each round sent a cannonball-sized hole through the wall, causing another wave of screams and crimson to spatter against the far side of the hallway.
"When this is over, I'm shooting that gun,"
Dexter shouted between blasts.
"The recoil will break your arm,"
Wrath replied.
Wub, 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 wub.
Lance tilted his head. In the distance, he heard a faint engine that grew louder. He recognized the sound. It wasn't one he'd heard in a long time, but it was one he wouldn't forget. Grabbing Kolar, the captain shoved his prisoner.
"Get to cover!"
he barked.
"I am in cover,"
Kolar argued.
"Dropship inbound!"
Lance roared. A TT-33 Bravo roared into sight. It hovered over the clearing as its upper turrets turned toward them. Kolar vanished, getting behind a building quite a way away. The dropship opened fire. Wrath held up his hands, covering his face as the magnetically accelerated rounds slammed into him, causing him to stagger backward. He let out grunts of pain while Lance rushed to cover with the rest of his squad as well. Chunks of armor flew off the Tardig before he fell to the ground, a purplish green oozing from his motionless body. All gunfire ceased. Only the hum of the dropship filled the air. A hiss accompanied its engines, that of the side doors opening.
"Captain Warder,"
a familiar voice barked while the magnetic grapple hummed.
"Come out, or I kill everyone."
Reaching the edge of the stand he hid behind, the captain poked his head out for a split second. Irene descended from the ship, her hands behind her back. His former trainee was in similar black armor, with the Veles symbol emblazoned on her breastplate in gold. Unlike her counterparts, she didn't wear a helmet. Instead, her hair was pulled back tightly against her skull, without a single strand out of place. On the dropship, he noticed the defensive mine doors were open. With explosives specifically designed to penetrate ship hulls, no one within 100 yards would survive.
"Fine, you win,"
Lance replied, as he emerged from cover. Raising his rifle, he pointed it directly at her exposed head. He noticed her eyes held an electric hint of blue. Her hair seemed lighter than at their last encounter. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Kolar taking several deep breaths, having returned to the edge of the battlefield.
"I'm surprised to see you survive the two-part explosive I helped get in you,"
Irene mused.
"Best case scenario usually ends with the subject catatonic."
"Kolar, don't you move!"
Lance barked, seeing the Galileo starting to lift his rifle.
"You see the octagonal door open on the side of that dropship? It holds a mine with the explosive yield of 1/2 kiloton of TNT.
"Is that supposed to mean anything to me?"
Kolar scoffed.
"It means that if the mine detonates, it'll kill everything for over 75 yards with its blast alone,"
Irene replied.
"Meaning you don't get justice for your mom. You only get everyone killed,"
Lance added.
"Hold your fire,"
Irene shouted, as she raised a hand and looked at her men in the above hallway.
"It's good to see you again, Lance."
"The feeling most certainly is not mutual,"
Lance snarled.
"How'd you even get on the station?"
"We have mutual friends in high places,"
she replied, before raising an eyebrow at the weapon aimed at her head.
"We both know you can't pull that trigger. If you do—"
She pointed at the ship above her.
"So why don't you just lower it and we can talk?"
"Take the shot!"
Dexter shouted. The soldier glanced around. A slight movement caught his eye from Wrath's chest. Val was 50 yards away, his team less than 10. With a defeated sigh, he lowered his weapon.
"Good boy. Now drop it and kick it away,"
Irene taunted. Lance obeyed while eyeing the dropship, trying to work out a way to knock it out of the sky without killing Irene, so she'd be less likely to give the order.
"And I know about your plasma blade tucked away in your multi-tool. Take that off, too," she added.
Once again, he followed her orders. "Why not attack us during our assault on the Reeves?" Lance asked. "Why wait until we're here?"
The technology at our disposal, while impressive, wouldn't have been able to get us there in time. This alien refuge had to do.
"And this is still all because you blame me for your dismissal from OCS?"
"It's so much more than that. There are genes in humanity that only the strongest should have. You, unfortunately, carry those genes. But more importantly, you express them."
"You're coming after me because I have blue eyes?"
"This is exactly what I mean!"
Irene roared, her face turning red as she trembled and pointed at him.
"You're unaware of what you carry. You don't deserve to wield it."
"Even so. With how many humans there are, how could it not have been easier to just find another person with similar expressed traits? I mean, this sounds like a lot of work." He attempted to stall, to keep her talking. Lance kept his ears out for the footsteps or engines of Alcazar security, or SOAT reinforcements. He heard nothing so far.
"None of the ones we've found were strong enough to survive. You're the strongest we've seen. I have a theory that you'll be able to withstand it."
"And if I choose not to go with you, you'll just what, obliterate me?"
"Then we'll take you and kill everyone else,"
Irene replied, as she attempted to recenter herself. Lance looked over his shoulder at the handful that were left at the top of the stairs. He then looked at the dropship. It still had its drop doors open, but angled away from him. "You really think, even without our armor, we can't hold off what little forces you have left until help arrives?" Lance asked.
"Not without amassing casualties that you're not prepared to take,"
Irene replied, as she tapped on her multi-tool. Even from where he was, Lance could see she was opening a channel to someone.
"Deploy Project Ibex for retrieval."
The ship above her shook as the clanging of heavy metal boots rang out over the transport's engines. The entire craft listed to its left, as a being in a suit of black, slick armor lunged from the craft. He landed, no weapon in hand or multi-tool on his wrist. His armor resembled S4 armor, only it was a matte black with a gold visor in his helmet to cover his face. Rising to his full height, he was marginally taller than Lance. He punched the air twice. Lance grabbed the bullet hole in his uniform sleeve and ripped it off before wrapping his unprotected hand.
"You have your target. Bring him to me alive,"
Irene ordered.
"Kill anyone who interferes."
3. Equal skill. Lance tugged on both of his hand wraps to make sure they were secure. He eyed his approaching opponent up and down, looking for weaknesses in the armor. They were few and far between. Even the joints of his armor were reinforced. That was when he picked up the distinct lack of nanobot markers that helped reinforce the S4 suits. Staying on the balls of his feet, Lance raised his fists to help protect his face as he moved in to meet his opponent in the center of the now cleared Tindus. Keeping each breath slow and even, he held his focus on the being before him. Judging by the opponent's footwork, Lance assumed a right jab once he was within range.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?